Welcome to Books Boys, live from the Grand Library, the Dean and PJ.
He's PJ.
Hello there, everyone.
I'm the Dean, and we are the Books Boys.
The one and only. The special.
This is the Books Boys show. Get it? Buy it? Books.
Books. Definition, a mixture of paper. So
Mixture of paper, yes.
Yeah.
And we're telling people to buy the general concept of books.
But there's been a
Singular
big
concept.
problem. There's been a big problem, Dean, actually. I've been getting a lot of complaints.
Oh, no.
Yes, people have been confusing books with toilet roll paper. And it's just everyone's been
Is this a
buying at the
common
pharmacy.
problem?
Yes, because they understand that because a book is a collection of paper. So they've been trying
It
to
is a
read.
paperous subject. It is indeed.
Yes, so it's been very difficult trying to read the Tempest from a toilet roll, and it's all been a bit of a disaster. So there you
Okay, everyone, look, public service announcement. Do not try to read very important classical pieces of literature from the toilet roll. You will find it's not as good.
go. It's not quite as good, but it might be easier to understand sometimes, Sometimes. It might be.
It might be. It might be. The language is simpler, for sure.
The language is simpler. It's very abstract. That's the ultimate abstract form, isn't it? That's the ultimate kind of modernist concept. Let's try to be experimental. And some go wordy, and some of them, let's go minimal. In the end, you just blank piece of paper, and that's it.
Well, if you're a new listener and you have no idea what we're talking about, basically, we're the Books Boys, and we're on a mission to teach the kids about books. Put down your clouds and your Twitters and get some books.
Talking about books and teaching the kids, we've got something very exciting starting this month. Do you want to mention what it is,
We
Dean?
do indeed. Some of you were quick enough to get the download while it was up last weekend on the feed, but we have our new Patreon launched, patreon.com/booksboys, and that's our new show. You've heard it teased before. It's the Bufanda Boys.
Bufanda Boys. Good Lord.
So what you get on the Bufanda Boys is you get this show recorded early with scarves, and you get our bonus shows. And we've already put up 5 episodes of the Playboys.
Oh, Playboys. Now, Bufanda Boys. So it's basically the concept comes from that we're just doing the show, but that you can see us. So it's kind of we're just doing the show again. That was the original concept, but wearing fancy scarves.
But now we're doing it again 2 days previous. So we're doing the show. It's a word for word re-recording of the show in the past.
Going back in time, yes.
With conceptual only scarves because it's summer. But yeah, the key points are you get the show early and you get our bonus shows. So we've got the Playboys, which is our Shakespeare, and well, there will be some Greek plays too. But at the moment we've done 5 Shakespeares, and we go into those in depth.
Indeed.
And so you're going to get essentially, instead of a monthly show, you will get a weekly show, because you will get the original show, you will get the Playboys, you will get the Caper Captains, where we talk about some Agatha Christie.
Oh, fancy stuff.
And you will also get some interviews from the vault, old interviews with musicians that I did many, many years ago, that I've thrown up a few of those on there as well. So you're going to be able to get a lot of extra content for the less than the price of a cup of coffee per month.
And guys, we're getting deep into the works of the Bard. So we're talking about all his plays, just slowly. So we've got about 5, 6 coming up. So we'll see how many we'll get done. But we won't only stick with the old Shakespeare. As Dee mentioned, we'll be getting into Greek plays. I have some plays ready as well. We're some projects, but we don't want to give them away right now. Just so you know that there'll be several kind of new content coming up if you sign up to Patreon. And for this month, May, we're doing it for $3. Is that right, Dean? Just a special discount.
Yeah, it's down there for $3. We
just
are
for 1
thinking
month.
about sort of settling that on 5, but we thought we'd start it out, a little bit less, just to get some people to try it out.
That's very good.
It's good. And do you know what? For anyone that wants to support the show but doesn't want to pay a monthly fee, there is a button on there to just donate a one-off. If you think, I can't afford to pay every month, but I'll give these guys $5, just buy us a book. Just buy us a book.
Just buy us a book, guys. Just buy us a book, toilet paper, books,
send us some toilet paper.
Whatever you want. We'll write on the toilet paper. We'll write some great stuff. So there you go. So we've been busy reading Shakespeare this month. Now I admit you've done more reading, but I've really almost only read The Bard and getting.
But PJ, I cheated because I spend most of the month reading Shakespeare the same as you, and as a result of that, I did read a lot of other books, but they're shorter books. I've got the quantity is up, but the quality is down, and the actual length of the books is down. So, and
it's very amusing kind of reading The Bard and then reading something very modern in between. It's kind of, and I have to say, though, I've always enjoyed Shakespeare, but getting really into him, that sounds a bit, getting really into the works of the bards, shall I put it that way, it was very, what's the word? It was just a lot of fun. And talking about
it was a lot of fun.
I never done that before. Talking with someone, reading Shakespeare together with someone, then talking about afterwards. And this is the results of our. And
for anyone that's interested, we've done Midsummer Night's Dream, The Tempest, The Comedy of Errors, As You Like It, also known as PJ Doesn't Like It, and then we've done Romeo and Juliet, and up next we think is going to be Hamlet. So
that's right.
Good stuff.
There's more comment. Actually, guys, if you have any thoughts about Shakespeare, or would like us to read a specific play of Shakespeare that hasn't been mentioned yet, go ahead and leave a comment. We'll be delighted to take any play. You can leave a comment
on the site. You can also email booksboys@hotmail.com. And once we get people signed up for the Patreon, we can actually do polls on there. And the people who are listening can vote for which plays they want. So that's something we can do in the future as well.
Exactly. There you go. And yeah, guys, just go ahead and just ask us any questions about anything you like at all, about life, about Shakespeare, about why we wear scarves, anything you like, or what books are. Just ask us the question, what is a book? And we'll try to come up with a solution, but I haven't come up with a good definition quite yet.
It's a very difficult question.
It is a difficult question.
A lot of material. But so in addition to reading Shakespeare, we have read some other books this month, and we will talk about them. I read Seicho, but that's for a super secret special project coming up in the next month, so you'll know about that when it happens.
Oh yeah.
I've done a few other things. I've been interviewed by another podcast, but that's not available yet. So as soon as they post that episode, I'll mention it on our next episode then, and I'll tell people how to find that as well. But what we're going to talk about today are the other books that we've read this month. So I started out, we finished last month. I went to apply to be a governess. I didn't get the job, sadly. My references were insufficient. So I've come back and I've read another Victorian book. I've read The Mill on the Floss by a Miss George Eliot.
Miss George Eliot. All right. And it's supposed to be a classic, but
it's supposed to be a classic. Now I can see the look that PJ's giving me on the super secret webcam session here, where we are joined this week by a Cupid. Joined by Cupid this month in the webcam sessions.
Shakespeare would be proud.
Yeah. Turns out that I didn't like this book.
Oh, no.
So, I read a 500-page book, and then in the end, I still didn't really know what the title meant. The Mill on the Floss. So they work at a mill. I guess the Floss is the river or the riverbank or the area. It's not exactly the town. It's kind of semi-unclear and not really that important, to be honest. But this book, basically, it's about a little girl called Maggie Tulliver and her slightly older brother, Tom. And the early parts of the book are set during their childhood, and Maggie's misbehaving, and she's cutting her hair off to spite her parents and all this kind of stuff. To be honest, the early part of the book, this book could have been made shorter because the first quarter is just irrelevant. Then they grow up suddenly, and the rest of the book takes place during their sort of more adult lives. So I think we could have lost a little bit of content here.
Okay.
So George Eliot, if you're listening in the future, Graves, when you're writing this book again, just trim it down.
Well, she might be, because we seem to be time traveling with all those Patreon things, 3 days.
That's
so
it.
It might be.
We never know,
yeah. So there you go.
But the thing is, so there's not a massive amount to say about the book. It's a slow mover in the typical Victorian fashion. But basically, what happens is Tom gets sent off to school. The dad runs the mill, and Maggie falls in love with this little chap, Philip. The problem with Maggie's lover, and they just meet in the woods and talk, and he gives her some books and whatever. But he's got some kind of physical health problems. He sounds like a great lad, right?
Yeah.
he's got some physical health problems. It's sort of described that he's somewhat of a cripple, but she overlooks that. That's fine. The problem is this chap is kind of a bit classier than them, a bit better off, and also his dad is the rival of her dad. So they are forbidden.
So it is a bit of a Romeo and Juliet kind of
bit
version.
of a Romeo and Juliet.
Victorian.
They're forbidden to be together, and they have to do a bit of sneaking around. But what happens is, and it's not a major spoiler because it happens early on, is that Maggie and Tom's dad, he gets sick for a while, and then he does unfortunately pass away and leave Tom to kind of become the man of the house.
It seems to be every English Victorian novel is just like, some parent member dies, and then the kids are kind of left to their own devices. And literally every time the same thing. Like every Victorian novel you've told me about, just is that. That's it. Just you're obsessed.
And I'm going to give you a quote. I'm going to give you a quote because to George Eliot's credit, there's a little bit of that Dickensian wit. Not a lot, but there's little instances of it.
Okay.
So he wants Tom to be clever, but not too clever. He doesn't want him to be a lawyer because he thinks that lawyers are just, dirty swindlers, basically. But there's this particular quote that I like. Mm-hmm. So they have these family members. The mum has 4 sisters, and they all get involved, and they all say that dad's not good enough. And anytime anything happens, this never happened in our family before you married into that other family, the Tullivers. In our family, this kind of thing was never heard of before. And what would the neighbors think? And there's an awful lot of that goes on.
Okay.
And they say the following: "It is well known that this conjugal complacency belongs only to the weaker portion of the sex, who are scarcely alive to the responsibilities of a wife as a constituted check on her husband's pleasures, which are hardly ever of a rational or commendable kind." So the sisters believe that the wife's job is just to make the husband's life less pleasurable because his hobbies were garbage anyway, basically.
Right. Okay. Oh god. Okay. So there's a bit of wit there. Okay. You made it sound very dry.
There's a bit of wit. It's not quite as dry, but the main problem is Maggie goes to see her cousin for a while, and even though she's got Philip's best friend is engaged to Maggie's cousin. So they've got this lovely little foursome. They can go pleasure boating and singing and playing piano and various things until Maggie and Stephen fall in love with each other. So that's the cousin's fiancé. So they fall in love. Insert scandal here. Insert Victorian morals here. Girl banished from home and from the town and all this kind of things. And then the plot goes on.
Okay. Cheeky.
But I have to mention our favorite scene, PJ, which is after the dad gets sick and he's sitting in his armchair. Maggie likes to spend her evenings at her father's knee. So she will just take a little low stool and just sit on the floor, almost on the floor, after she's finished her day of sewing, and just rest her head on her father's knee all evening, just hoping that he will provide some kind of notice that she's there, some kind of affection, maybe tussle her hair or speak with her, and he does not. So she just spends her days just sitting, waiting to be acknowledged.
Oh my god, okay. That's such a Victorian theme, isn't it? I mean, I find
it. Yes.
Oh my god.
It's very Victorian.
Did you know, by the way, that Eliot translated German religious and philosophical texts, including I think she translated Feuerbach, and I think she might have translated. No, Nietzsche came later, but she read Nietzsche, I believe. So she was kind of influenced by some of these German philosophers as well. But I think she might have been more influenced by the slightly more religious kind of philosophy, like Friedrich Strauss' Life of Jesus, which is more of a humanist impression of Jesus Christ as a man and not as a divine person. But I think she might be taking some kind of religious philosophical themes when she was translating.
It could be that is consistent with what I read, definitely.
Okay. Yeah.
This is one of her early books, actually, 1860. Maybe I need to try the more famous ones, Middlemarch, for example, or even Silas Mariner. I'm not saying that I liked this. It was a pleasant read. Just not a lot really happened. It wasn't anything special as far as the Victorian stuff goes. And then, of course, the ending sweeps away the entire story and effectively makes all the details of the book and all the family issues and everything just completely irrelevant. So it's almost like a kind of Deus Ex Machina, but it's just it's not a god from the machine. It's just a sudden freak event, which just kind of makes everything. And it's such a depressing ending. I mean, my God, it's.
But guys, just in case you're wondering why all these Victorian novels they seem so depressing, well, Victorian England was a pretty depressing place. I mean, if you think about it, a lot of the Industrial Revolution was happening, and a lot of people were repressed. And sure, Marx talks about it, but Dickens, Eliot, these people, Thomas Hardy later on, they talked a lot about the people being suppressed, and especially Eliot and Thomas Hardy, especially, they go more into the province and they talk about the people who don't live in the cities, who work in like farms and under harsh conditions. And basically that's part of the overall realistic movement in literature that happened around the second half of the 19th century. So all these people, who were concerned, like Karl Marx, all these people who were concerned about society, they talked about society. And yeah, they often had depressing endings, gritty sort of backgrounds. And they were big into descriptions. So that's why these books are very long and sometimes wordy. But you get the same thing in Spain with Benito Pérez Galdós or Balzac and Flaubert in France. Yes, so I mean, it's quite a common thing. But I find they're brilliant. Like, I don't know, Dean, I think they're all usually brilliant describers. They describe brilliantly. But I almost always feel like, my God, could you just please edit this novel down by 200 pages? Or like Anna Karenina, it's just Anna Karenina is a short story, and just no editor would dare to go through. no editor. So what they did was, so Tolstoy wrote a short story, and then the guys, the editor said, well, what about that farming manual that you've been trying to get out for 20 years or whatever? Can you not just add that in? The 700 page farming manual to the short story, and that's it. It's
I wonder if that was even intentional. Do you think like he left the script on their desk and the farming manual was sitting beside it and some clerk just picked it all up together and
I know what it was.
It got mixed in.
They needed, so he wrote it. I bet he wrote it farming manual. No one wanted it, of course. And then he said, right, well, I've got this short story. And he said, well, look, actually, we want a big novel like War and Peace. So because that came earlier. He said, well, I've got this farming manual. Okay, don't worry, Liv. Don't worry, old chap. We're just going to put the short story in the middle of your farming manual and call the whole thing a novel.
That's it. And that's how to do it. So chaps, like if you want to write a novel and you're struggling, just write some mundane details about farming and then just put some characters in and call it a novel.
It's called the Tolstoy method. It's basically, it's just, I mean, if Lev Tolstoy would be alive now, he'd probably be doing TED Talks and all these kind of like £100 workshops, how to like, what to do with recycling kind of material, in literature.
Could well be. Well, before I move on, I do have another quote, and it is from The Mill and the Floss, but it tells you, in case you're wondering, all these Victorian books sound awful, what's Dean's obsession with them? This quote pretty much sums it up. It's the romance. It's that Wuthering Heights style romance. Maggie, whose pain can have been like mine, whose injury is like mine, who besides me has met that long look of love that has burnt itself into my soul so that no other image can come there. Maggie, call me back to you. Call me back to life and goodness. I am banished from both now. I have no motives. I am indifferent to everything. 2 months have only deepened the certainty that I can never care for life without you. Write me one word. Come. In 2 days I shall be with you. It's just this yearning and this intensity that I love.
Well, that's I feel like, to be honest, I just talked about realism, but I feel like British literature always kept that kind of romantic Wuthering Heights romanticism. They didn't really get too deep, I find, into like just gritty realism or naturalism.
They didn't, not as much as some of their European counterparts. I think British literature did stay very romantic,
and I get that because you love all that stuff. So yeah, I can completely get why you love the Victorian literature.
So then, after that book, what I thought I would do, PJ, is I thought, why don't I do our guilty pleasure book for the month?
Oh, Lord.
And I thought I would read Virginia Andrews' Flowers in the Attic. This was given to me, the first 3 books in this series out of the 5.
Oh, really?
And I thought, okay, look, this looks similar to some of the guilty pleasure stuff I've read. But no, I actually, genuinely really liked Flowers in the Attic to the point where I think it's a genuinely good book. I do have some comments about it, and there's some controversies about it, but as a standalone book, out of a series. If we look at it on its own, I thought it was a really, really powerful book. Now, Virginia Andrews, by the way, there's 5 books in this series. The 5th one was co-written. It was a prequel and was co-written actually by a ghostwriter. So she died in the 80s. Most Virginia Andrews books were not really written by her. She's been dead for years. But they keep releasing books under her name.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So
she only wrote like 12 books, and then there's like 60.
Okay. So it's kind of right. Okay. So I thought she was alive, honestly, still.
No, they just keep using her name, but she's gone.
Okay.
She died in 1986, I think.
So that adds to the creepiness to her stories, right? Because she is essentially a horror novelist, isn't she?
I guess, yeah.
Yeah.
But this is an early one. It's 1979, and it's about the Dollengangers. So it's her first novel. Basically, we have this family, and they're a happy little family. And the early scenes just show the mum's so happy. The dad goes out to work and comes back, and the mum gets all pretty for him. And they have little parties, and the kids are there, and they're all beautiful. And everyone calls them the Dresden Dolls because they're just such a perfect little beautiful family. And you think, well, okay, this is a novel, so what's going to happen to destroy this perfect beautiful family? Something's got to happen. And of course, the dad dies in a car accident.
Again, kind of a Victorian theme. Not honestly, because that's like American Gothic. This is now we're going to American Gothic, but it's so Victorian still.
It is a bit. It is, yeah. I mean, there's some Victorian flashback type traits in this book. And basically what happens is the mum says, and the oldest kids at this point are 14. So there's Chris, named after the dad. The mum's Corinne. They all start with C. The older son he's Chris. The daughter, who's the narrator, is Kathy. And then there's 2 little twins, Corey and Carey. And the mum says, well, I never told you this in your entire life, but my parents are mega rich, and we're going to go live with them now. But actually, they didn't like the fact that I married. They disinherited me. They don't speak to me anymore, and they don't actually know that I have children. So the mum's letting us sneak in, but the dad can't know about it. So just hide in this one room for maybe 1, maybe 2 nights, and I'll try to win back his affections.
That's mad.
So they're waiting and waiting. And she says, look, we're going to inherit all his money. He's going to die in a month or 2. We're going to get everything. So just sit tight, And they've got this one room with stairs to the attic full of mice and spiders. And it's like cold, and it's horrendously cold up there. And they go to live in this massive mansion, and the kids are locked in one room. And then a day becomes 2 days. 2 days becomes a week becomes a month. And in the end, they're there for 4.5 years almost.
Great plot so far, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I like it.
And they're the flowers in the attic. They are the flowers, and they're spending most of their time in the attic. And the grandmother comes in and feeds them, just some cold food in a basket every morning. And they've got a list of rules. They're not allowed to look at each other. They're not allowed to share the bathrooms or share the beds because she's afraid of incest, basically. And it turns out the reason she's afraid of incest is because the mother and father were relatives. They were uncle and niece who got married and had the kids, and that's why the father disowned them.
Fortunate, yeah. All right.
The problem is, in order to atone and be let back into the house, the mother has to take down her blouse and let the grandmother whip her back. 1 whip for every year of her life. And then they accept her back after that penance. But there's always this threat to the children. Now, to be honest, I think only once the children really get hit in those 4 years. But there's always a threat of it. And at one point, tar gets poured on the girl's hair so that she can't be pretty anymore. And, these are kids going through puberty, and they're not allowed to look at their bodies or anything like this. They're just taught that they're sinful, that they're devil spawn by this religious fanatic grandmother.
Wow, okay. That's mad. Well, so we got all the themes of classic, kind of, not classic, but kind of American Gothic, 20th century American Gothic. You got the incense themes. We got the kind of perfect kind of family that's only perfect in the surface, and there's a lot of deep repression beneath it, and you've got the element of tension, right? That's in Gothic. That's what's going to happen. So and this was released in 1979. So you got all these, you got the kind of horror film movement happening with Halloween and Jason the 13th and Friday the 13th coming up. So it seems to be a kind of a very relevant thing for the time, like kind of...
Yeah, there is a movie of this, but it got bad reviews, so I haven't watched it. I don't want to spoil the book for myself.
Fair enough, yeah.
But I should say, I've made it sound really good. I do have to just quickly mention the negative aspects. The book takes place in a strange world. It's a bit Freudian. It's a bit depraved. It's a world where all this plot stuff about being trapped in the attic and everything, that's the scary stuff, right? And I mean, the mum keeps basically coming in and saying, I'll just buy you gifts and then you'll love me. But she stops visiting them. Daily becomes weekly, becomes monthly, becomes quarterly, that she never goes to see them. But she'll just come in with gifts. And they start saying, Mum, you're like looking great and radiant, and you're playing tennis, and you're coming in amazing dresses with jewelry. You've got a new car. We're starving. We're hungry. We're thin. We're not growing. We look ill. And it's horrible. But then you add in these Freudian elements where the brother and sister do become attracted to each other despite the grandmother's rules. And there's a sexual assault. And it all just gets a bit muddled. And the book takes place in a weird universe where it is assumed not only that the brother and sister are attracted to each other, but that they were both attracted to their opposite sex parents. And it's just normal. Like, it's not even considered strange that the boy fancies the sister only because she looks like the mother. And vice versa. It's a bizarre sort of setting.
Okay. Yeah.
And there's some bits that were hard to read at times. But overall, I liked it as a book. And that was my folly, because then I read the damn sequel.
Oh no!
Petals on the Wind.
And did it live up to its hype?
No.
Oh no!
The sequel's garbage. So.
Okay.
I came in thinking the first book was going to be a bit trashy, and it turned out to be really good. The second book is the trashy book that I thought the first book was going to be.
Okay, unfortunate, yeah.
So they've now escaped from the attic, and the boy wants to be a doctor, the girl wants to be a ballerina, but they meet this guy, Dr. Paul, and he's a 40-odd-year-old widower, 40 or 41, and he takes them in. And at this point, the daughter is 12, and the older son is a few years older, so I think he's maybe 18-ish now. And he takes them in, and the daughter immediately then tries to seduce the father, the new father, the adopted father. She decides, well, he's a handsome guy. Yes, he's 25, 26 years older than me. And he keeps saying to her, like, please, I want you to just be my daughter, my son. I'm happy with this situation.
Yeah.
But she's always like wearing skimpy clothing and sitting on his lap and stroking his cheek. I mean, at one point she just grabs him by the crotch when he refuses to kiss her, and she takes a lot of measures to tempt him. And eventually he makes them, it takes two to tango kind of thing, but he gives in and off they go. And they decide that they want to marry.
It's a very kind of trashy depiction, isn't it, of women?
Because at the same time, the brother is obsessed with her. Like, he doesn't want anyone else to date her. She's his. He's very possessive.
And I'm surprised it's a woman who wrote it, because it sounds like more like a man writing it who doesn't know women. Do you know what I mean? Like the opposite, kind of just.
Yeah, that is a theme throughout this series. It's sort of because you get these type of themes in old Victorian books, and then you say, well, they were written by fussy old men, but this is written by a woman, so it's slightly unusual.
Okay, strange. Well, the way you make it sound, I mean, I haven't read the book, but it's got all the themes of Southern Gothic, guys. So it's Southern Gothic is Gothic fiction in America, especially in as I said, like 70s onwards, but also like William Faulkner kind of got into it a bit. And it's always got a disturbing character in it. Usually it is a religious fanatic or someone who's joined a cult, someone who believes something that is not really accepted. It's got a very kind of alienating, kind of dark, disturbing settings. The situation is almost always absurd, or it's kind of a nightmare situation. Like, oh, my car is stuck in the middle of nowhere, or oh, I'm stuck in the attic, like in this case. Mm-hmm. Plus, poverty is a big thing in Southern Gothic. So I don't know how much that is in it, but poverty and crime and like physical, psychological kind of distancing. So it's got all that there. And actually, guys, if you probably know this more from films, because all those films, like we mentioned before, slasher movies like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but also moving on to more modern films like Park Chan-wook's film Stoker, they've all got this eccentric sort of Southern American, some kind of Federalist kind of person he's not really modern anymore. He's too old fashioned as well, or he's too bizarre. Mm-hmm. So interesting. I would like to read the first book, but like the second one just sounds too much. Just sounds way too much.
Yeah, just read the first. I mean, I haven't even got into the half of it.
Okay.
So the ballerina
Oh
girl, I mean, her teacher's son fancies her, and they dance together. They make beautiful magic when they dance. They've got love and passion and chemistry. But he becomes possessive of her again and decides that they're going to date. And to spite her brother, instead of marrying the adopted father, she marries this guy who's horrible to her. Like, he hurts her. He pushes her, gives her black eyes at one point. He leaves her out in the rain and drives off without her. Like, he's just horrible.
Yeah.
But she marries him anyway. They have a tumultuous relationship, and then they have a child. And while she's pregnant, he dies, so that she can then marry the adopted father.
Right. Okay.
But in between, she also decides, well, you know what I'd like to do? That mother who was horrible to us, she's gotten remarried. So my revenge is going to be to seduce her new husband and have a child with her new husband, who's also 25 years older than me.
Oh, that's a bit much now. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, they lost me with that. Like, that was unnecessary, and it was a bit much, you know.
So it's a kind of an exploitation kind of book, isn't it? Just getting like trying to grab the attention of some. Okay, that's disappointing.
And I don't know if you'll be surprised, but after that, I needed a palate cleanser. PJ,
I wasn't surprised.
The third one.
So I believe
I have no intention of reading all 5. I think I'm going to stop at 3.
Okay,
but I just thought I can't do 3 right now. I need to read something pure.
So what did you read?
As far removed as I could get from Petals on the Wind, I read Pride and Prejudice by one Jane Austen.
Another woman author, and one that has more understanding of women, probably. By the sound of it. Mm-hmm. Okay, and how did you enjoy that?
Well, I should stress, for anyone that says, he's gone back to his Victorian stuff, this is pre-Victorian. This is pre-Victorian, okay?
Pre-Victorian, guys.
Late romantic poetry era, pre-Victorian English
literature. Believe Queen Victoria might have not been born? 1813, right?
So. This is a little bit earlier than your usual core Victorian stuff. I mean, she's writing mostly late 1700s, you know, so it is a little bit earlier than the likes of the Brontes and Dickens.
Because it came out in 1830, Pride and Prejudice. And Victoria wasn't born until 1819, guys, so don't get confused now. All right.
So Pride and Prejudice, 1813. You're right. After Sense and Sensibility. Now, I've had 6. Is it 6? All but one of Jane Austen's books on my bookshelf for months, and I just haven't read any of them. But I just decided now was the right time, the palate cleanser.
Okay.
So I read Pride and Prejudice, and basically what we have here. I mean, everyone has a rough idea of the story, of the aesthetic. You know, everyone kind of knows what Pride and Prejudice is. You've seen a movie or whatever. You got Elizabeth Bennet and you got Mr. Darcy. Now, I think that there's elements of this book that I can actually see as being predecessors almost to some of the Bronte stuff. Darcy's similar to Rochester in Jane Eyre, I think, in certain ways.
Okay.
And there's just certain elements that you can see creeping into the later Victorian literature.
And what about the themes? I mean, I haven't actually read Pride and Prejudice, I have to admit. So what are the themes very similar in the sense of kind of because Victorian literature is all about like morality and like kind of
that's here to a strong height.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So even then it was relevant. Okay. Cool.
So basically, we've got Elizabeth Bennet. She's the main character. Her older sister Jane. I don't know if that's deliberately named after the author or not. Middle sister Mary, who likes books. That's all we know about Mary. She does nothing the rest of the novel. She just likes to read. Then
that's good enough, Dean. Don't underestimate that.
Enough, right?
That's great. That's a great quality, people. If that's all you do, fair play on you.
But she's the one who's most grounded in the end. The rest all end up doing other things, and she just sticks with, But we've also got Kitty and Lydia, the 2 younger ones, and they're a bit wild, especially Lydia.
Okay.
So the novel starts very slowly, and I didn't think I was going to like it. And it's not a long novel; it's less than 400 pages. But I didn't think I was going to like it because it starts out with a lot of slow preamble, a lot of irrelevancies, really, about Jane and Mr. Bingley. And Mr. Bingley's going to marry Jane, but then he goes off and he doesn't marry her. For the first quarter of the novel, you don't really know what the central story is or who the main characters are. It just seems to be a bit wishy-washy in the beginning. However, what we do need to stress is the very, very beginning, because the book starts with a famous quote, which I'm just going to open the book now. You will have heard this quote before. So, here we go. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. So that's the famous opening line.
Yeah, that's famous, yeah.
And basically what we have that guy Den of Jane's story with Mr. Bingley, but Jane's very shy. She's sensible, but she's very much she sees the good in everyone because she's so naive. She can't believe anyone would do anything bad. Then we've got Lydia, who just wants to flirt with soldiers and bring Kitty with her. So they go off and flirt with soldiers. 16-year-old Lydia disappears, runs off with a soldier. And that's the big scandal. It's the Victorian-style scandal, you know. You've destroyed the family. We can never see you again. You've eloped with a soldier. You need to move away with him. We can never see you again because you were seen with him before the marriage, and that's just too much of a scandal in this society. You know?
And guys, try to remember, why is Pride and Prejudice relevant? Not just because it's possibly a good novel, but you also have to look at it historically. 1813 is not really a year for realistic novels describing society like Jane Austen does, and the moral dilemmas, and already describing people who might have been of a decent background, but something scandalous happens and it ruins their lives. So it's moving away from these novels of sensibility. So these novels from the 18th century that are very kind of, they're maybe very naive, and they didn't really describe realistically the society. It's more like it's very sentimental. But anyway, like she's actually moving to realism, and it's very early, to be honest. Dickens hasn't, Dickens is, again, is Dickens even born? I believe he might have just been born 2 years before that. Balzac hasn't really started.
I'm not 100% sure.
Yes, Balzac hasn't really started writing yet. I mean, it's getting into realism already.
Dickens' early work, I believe, was in the 1820s or 30s, so he would have been alive, but he would have been young, you know?
So, I mean, she's basically starting this off, this whole realistic trend of describing society and all what's wrong with society as well. So,
and it's really, this is the prototype for your Victorian literature. It really is. Yeah. But the central story is around Elizabeth herself and Mr. Darcy. And Mr. Darcy, everyone says he's moody, he's this and that. She originally likes a chap called Wickham, who she finds out used to be friends with Darcy, but they fell out. So there's a lot of moral dilemmas in her between, like, well, which guy was the good guy here? Who am I supposed to befriend, you know? There's a lot of blushing, a lot of shyness when a man looks at you, a lot of afraid to meet his gaze. And he's kind of an ass in the early parts of the book. He's really rude to her. And he proposes marriage, but he says, look, you're beneath me. This is going to be a terrible scandal for my society, for my family. You know, your family's trash compared to mine, but I will marry you anyway. And he just assumes that she's going to say yes. And she's a strong feminist character. She tells him where to go. And then it's almost about his atonement and his redemption, a certain part of this novel.
Okay.
And I don't think, we don't normally give spoilers. I don't think it's much of a spoiler to say that they end up together. I think that everyone kind of predicted that, you know. But
but to be honest, like, guys, so these are realism starting out. And usually they're quite lighthearted, you know. So Dickens, Balzac, Jane Austen, if they're the prototypes of realism, because they're more like they're coming out of the romantic era, they usually do end up quite happily, you know, that kind of happily resolves in like Dickens and Jane Austen. But that goes away. That goes away later in realism. It's only at the beginning of the realism.
But even in Dickens, no matter how sad and depressing parts of the book are, they always get happily married in the last 50 pages. You know, it's always like, you know, and then everything worked out fine because they need that.
Yeah, exactly. And that goes away as George Eliot in the 1860s and Thomas Hardy and later in the, especially with Tess of the D'Urbervilles, that's like already 1890s. And then he got naturalism, which is like the dark part of realism, which is just really horrible stuff and really ending. So this is kind of the lighthearted form of realism. So yeah, that's why it's so important, this book and Jane Austen.
That's it. And you know, I did afterwards go back and finally read the third in the If There Be Thorns.
Are we back to her? Oh
yes, I did. Now, I haven't finished it. I'm about 3/4 of the way in now. I'll finish it tomorrow, but I just thought I would quickly mention it. If There Be Thorns, and this one's garbage as well, you know. Okay. So now the brother and sister are man and wife essentially, and they've got the two adopted kids, and one is with the dancer boy who died, and the other is with the mother's husband. And basically, what happens is one of the little boys is I don't know if he's crazy or if he's a bit schizophrenic. He has a lot of problems. His behavior is horrible and unruly. He's doing a lot of crazy things, and they're trying to deal with that. Meanwhile, he's going next door to talk to this rich old lady who's just moved in. And the rich old lady is the mother.
Of course she is, yes.
The rich old lady is the mother from the original book, and she wants to take away this son because the mother is not only his grandmother, but also his stepmother.
Yes,
because it was her husband that was the father. So she wants this kid and her old servant who knew about the stuff that was going on in the old house, because the old house burns down, by the way. So the mother's now there, and the old servant's with her, and he's filling the kid with a lot of religious hate. Be like your great grandfather, the old tyrant who ruled the family. You know, he had 20 billion in the bank.
Again,
it's horrible to everyone.
It's Southern Gothic again. Yeah, it's just basically a radical religion. But this is because this is like post-Vietnam. This is Vietnam, post-Vietnam, and it's kind of like U.S. society, guys, is criticizing itself because U.S. is very divided, as you might have realized from the news. Between, all right, so very conservative people and very open people, actually. There's not much middle ground. So I think that's what's happening here. Usually authors from Southern Gothic are actually criticizing the very conservative, radical, that do tend to live in the South. That's why it's Southern Gothic. Usually they tend to be in the South.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, it's got a very, again, like these Victorian novels, they got a very social important theme in them, even though they tend to be very trashy kind of paperback novels and trashy kind of films.
This one was a bit trashier. This one, by the way, is not told by Kathy. It's told by her two sons. So this is a bit strange because originally Kathy's kind of writing her memoirs in the first two books, basically. All of a sudden, this book's written alternate chapters by the two sons. So that's a little bit less realistic that they wrote some kind of dual memoir of their. I don't know. Like it's a little bit less realistic.
Okay.
Especially while one's going through all these issues. But yeah, so the mother moves in, the servant's there. There's so much sexism in this one. I mean, again, written by a woman, so much hatred towards women in this book. It's almost hard to read at times.
Wow, okay, that's a bit mad. Okay. I mean, I do want to read the first one because the atmosphere sounds interesting and it sounds like a interesting plotline, but that sounds a bit too much, yeah.
I would say the first one is worth reading and then stop. It goes downhill from the second to the third. As I say, I'm not going to try the fourth. And the person who gave me these obviously didn't either, because they only gave me the three. So I think they didn't bother with the fourth either, you know?
Think much, yeah.
They go downhill. But look, wow. I've said a lot of words. That is the things I've been reading. I think we need to hear what PJ's been reading. But just before we do, we will quickly hear from this month's sponsor. Oh. This month, we are sponsored by Mrs. Harris's Possibly Existent Products.
Possibly?
Mrs. Harris is a character from a Dickens book. And if you go to Mrs. Harris's Possibly Existent Products.com, you can get a whole range of things that may or may not exist, just like Mrs. Harris may or may not have existed.
So there you go.
So you get those things there and make us rich.
Yes, or maybe not get rich. Just it kind of depends. Are you going to get
Who
rich?
Knows? Depends whether or not it exists, I guess.
Yeah, does money exist? Do we exist, guys? Maybe we're just a product of your imagination. But anyway.
While we're on that front, I think we should quickly say hello to all the listeners because we have a lot of people listening on the podcast.
Hello.
But we also have people listening on Oxon Radio in Oxfordshire, so hello to everyone there.
Hello there.
And of course, if you go to booksboys.com, there's links to all the different podcatchers, the different places you can listen. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, a million places. So all those links and things are on there. And if you want to talk to us, don't forget we have our mystery book giveaway.
Oh.
We've got our mystery giveaway. Email us, tell us what you're reading. You might win a mystery book from the bounteous bookshelves. So that's something that you can do as well, and we'd definitely like to hear what you're reading, and we'd like to give away books. I've got so many books that I'm still able to give away.
Awesome, guys. Awesome.
With that said, PJ, what have you been reading?
Well, before I tell you what I want to read, I also want to just sponsor someone. I advertise someone. I suppose I'm advertising myself. So I'm just going to say it. I started a plant-based nutritional workshop called The Wholly Wholesome Life with my partner, Lisa. Now, it's her idea, actually. She's a bit more the She's a bit more the creator, and I'm kind of putting it all together. But basically, we're doing online workshops on how to eat vegan style, and a lot of it is actually raw vegan cuisine. And it's all about being, it's beneficial for your health. How can you not consume meats, animal products, and still be as healthy and not reduce weight? We're also doing some workshops on gaining weight if you want to, or losing weight using these diets. Also gluten-free nutrition, how you get all your vitamins. It's all about basically being healthy and also being conscious about the planet. So basically, just look it up. We do several workshops, and you can also book a workshop with us. Online, as I said, or if you're living on the island of Gran Canaria, also live, although reduced due to COVID right now. But anyway, it's called theholywholesomelife.com. And please join us. We can leave a link, and you can just click on it and have a look, see if you like it. So I've been busy with that. I've been busy with Shakespeare, and I'd love to talk about Shakespeare. All I'm going to say is that Shakespeare is the man. He is the bard. And just read him. It's been so delightful reading his stuff. Apart from Shakespeare, I have been reading 2 books this month. And one, actually, they've been given to me by Dean, sent by post. So I am on an island, not too many English books here. Thank you, Dean. And it's been our birthday, by the way. Dean, we have to mention that. It's been our birthday. So it's been
both of our birthdays in the last week. Yeah, wow. Well, in the last week and a half, it's been both of our birthdays.
Yes, your birthday 20th, mine the 23rd. So happy birthday to you, Dean.
And happy birthday to you, PJ.
So you were for 3 days, Dean. You were 1 year older than me. I mean,
1 year older, 1 year wiser. Really, the man that you actually look up to and aspire to be for those 3 days each year.
So those were some precious 3 days. Me looking up to you, having to respect you. And yeah, you sent me 2 P.G. Wodehouse books and I'm not going to mention the third one. But anyway, starting off with P.G. Wodehouse. Who is P.G. Wodehouse? P.G. Wodehouse is a great lad. That's all I'll say. I'll say a bit more.
Now you're showing me the book here, and I see some very spiffing chaps with hats and monocles in an open-top convertible.
And that is basically the universe P.G. Wodehouse has created. Now, P.G. Wodehouse is basically a comic author from the 1920s. Actually, not really. 1990s onwards. But he really got popular in the 19-teens, 1920s. Actually, first of all, for writing a lot of musicals that became famous in the US. He was a UK author, but he was mainly based in the US. But he wrote a lot of comic novels, so he was very prolific. And he created this beautiful universe of shared characters that kept intermingling. And yeah, so it's often kind of characters you would recognize from other books. But I think that the Jeeves and Wooster series of books are by far his best. Also, I grew up with them. My dad loves them. So here's one for my dad. He loves Jeeves and Wooster, also the series with Hugh Laurie and Stephen Fry. Look it up. So I started watching them when I was a teen, loved it. And then I started reading the books, and I also loved it. I have to say, it's a great adaptation. So watch the TV adaptation from the 90s because it's really realistic. And what I love about these books are guilty pleasure. Actually, there's a lot of debate about P.G. Wodehouse. In some sense, it's a guilty pleasure because they're very short books. They're very readable because they're comic situations taken to the absurd. So kind of like Shakespeare's best comedies. Comedy of errors, actually. It's actually usually a comedy of errors, if you think about it.
Yeah, it usually is. And they're very short. We're talking Agatha Christie length,
Agatha Christie length. Actually, Agatha Christie's even mentioned in Jeeves and the Offing. And you've read it yourself, Dean. And actually, it's the same kind of concept, basically, very short. It's basically about a man, Bertie Wooster, who's rich. It's great because he's just rich. He doesn't have to think at all. And he thinks he worries about things like his slippers go missing. And it's like there's not a bother in the world. These are the happy 20s or the gay 20s, whatever they called it back then. It's just basically everyone's jolly. It's jazz, drinking cocktails. And this is the atmosphere of the book. There's not a worry in the world. And the thing is, he did continue writing this up until his death, actually. So this book is from 1960, but still living in that naive 1920s world.
there's a lot of parallels between Wodehouse and Agatha Christie in the sense that although they wrote a lot of short books over a long period of time, the time period and the setting doesn't really change. They keep that same universe from the early books.
Exactly. So it's always about Bertie Wooster getting into a jam. It's always ridiculous. He's always having to do. In this book, he goes to his Aunt Dahlia. So he's got two aunts, but this is the one he actually really likes. And he goes to her house because his man, what's the word now? Is a manservant? Is that what they're called?
Manservant.
Manservant.
Butler, maybe.
Well, his butler, I suppose, is the correct term. His butler, Jeeves, basically goes shrimping at Herne Bay. And Bertie Wooster, he's kind of like a kid man. He just doesn't know what to do. He's supposed to be in his 30s, I think. But he just doesn't know what to do. He's the permanent bachelor. He needs everything to be done by Jeeves. And so, obviously, as soon as Jeeves, who's a very intelligent and well-read man, of course, he obviously always, at the end of the novel, he gets him out of a situation, of a tricky situation. Bertie Wooster always falls in. But now Bertie Wooster's left on his own device, and he causes havoc. He causes mad havoc because he has to go to Aunt Dahlia and make sure that a certain young man doesn't fall in love with a woman, and the woman is falling in love with him, but they're not supposed to fall in love because they're not of the same class. And there is his old schoolmaster, Bertie Wooster's old schoolmaster, is being a bit of a pain. And there's a great character in it who does pop up often, and that's Glossop. And Glossop is basically a psychologist. But he's just known as the eminent brain specialist. But he's basically kind of he's a bit of an idiot, actually. And Sir Roderick Glossop, he does appear a lot, and Sir Roderick Glossop is pretending actually to be a butler himself because he wants to observe the psychological makeup out of this man who's there falling in love with the wrong girl. So it's this kind of stuff, guys. I won't say more than that. Basically, what can we say about the plot? It's always kind of it's very similar to a mystery plot in the sense of you don't know how it's going to end. You have to kind of figure it out yourself. Mm-hmm. And Jeeves is basically the Poirot of these Jeeves and Wooster series. That's Jeeves and the Offering, guys. It might not be his best book, though. So his best book might be the early books. I particularly like Right Ho Jeeves is a good one. So especially the early Jeeves and Wooster books, they're a bit more, just they're wittier, I suppose. And I do want to quote a bit. See, this is why some people disagree. Some people think it's kind of like guilty pleasure, very easy read. But some people think it's very good literature because he's got a very unique and witty writing style. The writing style is what makes it funny, I think. Now, Dean, as far as I know, you weren't too fond of the writing style, were you?
I like the world it's set in because it's similar to Agatha Christie world. I love that world. I love the characters. I did find that there's not a lot of plot if you compare it to a Poirot where there's murders. It's a bit lacking in that kind of plot. But what got me, I mean, I could read it all day if it wasn't for the writing style. I think
so it didn't work for you.
He just tries to make humor by saying things in like a needlessly stuffy, fuddy-duddy kind of way, and it just didn't work for me all the time.
Well, P.G. Wodehouse, he does two things. He does, he describes it as basically, this is P.G. Wodehouse talking about his own writing style, actually. I'm going to quote, "I believe there are two ways of writing novels. One is mine, making a sort of musical comedy without music and ignoring real life altogether. The other is going right deep down into life and not caring a damn." So yeah, it's basically a musical comedy. And don't forget, he wrote actually musicals, but not the music, the text, and ignoring real life altogether. He's on purposely making this life absurd. And I do like his writing styles because he actually tends to abbreviate nouns completely. So one book, Jeeves plays the sizzling eggs and bee on the breakfast table.
That's the thing that I hated the most.
But I really love it because it's like usually, and I find usually my intuition is right. Although this time I had to think for 1 second because I haven't eaten bacon for so long. I thought it actually said Jeeves plays the sizzling eggs and breakfast and then on the breakfast table, which it could be. It's not. It's probably bacon.
I didn't understand why you would use those abbreviations. I don't know. I think I missed some of the essence of these.
Well, another one was just maybe funny for us is kind of, he said, I passed a hand over my fevered bro. Brow or bro? Bro. And then he says it later again, I passed another hand over my FB, but I thought literally he said I passed another hand over my Facebook.
Oh, right.
So obviously then I realized it's not Facebook.
Again.
It's 1920s, yeah. Anyway, guys, so it might not be your thing. He also animates objects. That's a big thing with P.G. Wodehouse. He animates objects. So you might say something like the table was feeling queasy under the weight of the teacup. And it's very ridiculous descriptions. But I think it's very witty. I enjoy it. But it could get a bit...
It's witty. It just wasn't quite my cup of tea.
Well, nicely said. Tea is mentioned a lot in these books. So, guys, that's all I have to say about Jeeves in the Offing. Even though I could go on about the beautiful world of P.G. Wodehouse. Give it a go, guys. It's great stuff. I have to say, also, just want to mention the other books he wrote. He did write some serious, actually, novels. And I have to say, I didn't get the serious ones he wrote. So his real strength lies in comedy. And so stick with the comedy, but he's a great short story writer as well. So if you don't want to get into his novels, just get into his short stories with a lot of different characters. Mr. Mulliner, Smith, Lord, Esmersworth, they're all great. So I really recommend it. The one I really recommend is called Mulliner Nights, with the character Mulliner. I have to say, Dean, I think you might enjoy them more. They're not quite as maybe over the top. And
right.
As the Jeeves and Wooster story. Mulliner Nights is basically Mr. Mulliner, and they're at the bar usually, and they're not, and just someone is telling a story, or he's telling a story. He's telling a story that's somehow related to something that happened in the bar. And I have to say, they're all kind of I thought they were kind of very philosophical stories, still very funny. And I think you might enjoy these actually, Dean. So Mulliner Nights. Thanks to my dad also for getting me into P.G. Wodehouse.
Cool.
And the other novel that I read, this is a great novel. I really recommend and really enjoyed it. It's by Anne Wedgwood, and it's called The Botanist. And it's been described by the author herself as a cozy mystery. But to be honest, like I didn't know that when I was reading it, and I thought it's very. I really enjoyed it. It's not really cozy. Like I thought it's quite dark, to be honest. And it might be. I really enjoy the main character. So it's set. It's basically that the character is a murderer. It starts off with the question, "Am I a psychopath?" And she asks, it's basically a woman who's retired, used to be a doctor. She's living in this house. Her daughter's moved out. Her mother just died. Her husband has kind of disappeared, right? But anyway, goes at the beginning. She's just worrying about her garden because these people have to come in to take out the pipeline. So, and she kind of thought they were coming next week, but they're coming on that day. So they came early. Yeah. They came early. And I really enjoy it because it's not a mystery in the sense of you don't know who it was. She's already
know who it is from the beginning, more or less.
But you don't really know what exactly it was she did and what.
You don't know. That's it. You don't really know what she did. There's some suspicions, and then even when you know certain details, you don't know everything that happened.
Exactly, and so just want to mention the listener, you read it, Dean, already, and so I read it after you sent it to me, and thank you very much. I'm really enjoying it. Influenced by Agatha Christie, definitely, and also it's got a bit of a similar Agatha Christie vibe of kind of like this dark atmosphere of tension, but still very readable. I have to say, it's not like American Psycho, which just leaves you a bit kind of, I can't continue this. It's still very readable, but still very dark for me, especially after reading P.G. Wodehouse. But no, I think the strength of this book is it's got a very compelling character. You feel for her. I suppose it also helps that she is she's a retired doctor. She's a woman. She's not really the kind of person you can't have feelings for. But at the same time, you're always wondering, what was it?
She's your granny, right? She's a little old lady, and that's you're meant to like her.
You're meant to like her. And I have to say, like, another strong character in the book is the detective who interviews her. And I really like the description of her, because she's described as a kind of interested sheep with dreamy eyes. And then, but all of a sudden, she's not a sheep anymore. She's kind of focused, and she's asking these very strong questions about the garden. The thing is, guys, in the garden lies a corpse. Dun dun dun.
Dun dun dun. That's it.
So that's basically the mystery. And of course, the idea is that the protagonist, Lillian, she doesn't know what to do now. She's worried that they found her out. So this has happened a while ago. And I mean, I like it. There's a bit of a again Southern Gothic vibe, I feel like, even though she's not really a Southern Gothic character, she's actually quite rational and not like, I mean, she's a very relatable character. Southern Gothic characters are not relatable. Usually they're very out there, like you just mentioned with VC Andrew characters. So she's very relatable, but there's a sense of Southern Gothic happening here. It reminded me a bit of Seicho. You just mentioned it. But in this case, she's the Norman Bates character, in the sense that she's kind of untrustworthy. You're not sure if you believe her. You're not sure if you believe the Seicho book. Actually, guys, in case you haven't read the Seicho book, is told from the perspective of Norman Bates, and the same here. But you're not sure exactly what she did. You're not sure if you can trust her. You're not sure if she's supposed to be the hero or the villain.
You're not sure.
Yeah,
that is
I
really
really like that, actually. I really like that. And I'm not sure if I should be liking her, and I'm not sure if I should be forgiving her for the things she did. She did commit, it's always from the beginning, if she committed a really terrible sin. So that you are left with that unpleasant sensation. You can't really love her, but you also don't want her to get caught. So I think that's great about the
book. You do. Yeah, it's kind of like when you're watching something like Tom and Jerry or Sylvester and Tweety cartoons, and you're looking at from the perspective sometimes of the one that's supposed to be the bad guy, but at the same time you do kind of want them to win,
And it's very easy to read, but also very well written. I really enjoyed it. I mean, I wish I could talk to Anne Wedgwood about the book, because there are a lot of questions I have to ask her.
That'd be really cool, wouldn't it? It'd be really, really cool. Hold on a second, PJ. I think I hear the telephone ringing.
All right,
shall we answer and see who's on the line?
All right, well, let's see what it is.
Hello, thanks for calling into Books Boys. You've got Dean and PJ on the line. How are you?
Hi, nice to speak to you. I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm grand. Do you want to tell us who we have on the line?
Who's this?
It's Anne Wedgwood.
What?
Anne, wow, that's a spectacular coincidence. We were just talking about your book.
This is amazing. Really? This is what I wished. Yeah, I was just saying, I would love to talk to you about your book, and you're actually calling in.
Well, isn't that helpful? I'm glad I caught you. It's exciting to hear you've been reading it.
Yes, very much enjoying it. Dean has finished it, and I haven't reached the ending yet, so please no spoilers. Dean, by the way, is a big one for spoilers. I have to keep stopping him, and I really don't enjoy it. But yeah, thanks for calling in, Anne. So I love your book. I really have to say. I really wanted to ask you one particular question, which it's on my mind the whole time, because it's basically, Lillian Templeton, the retired doctor, as I mentioned just earlier. She's found a dead body in her garden, and I have to say, like, how did you come up with this idea? I'm really curious about it. What inspired you to write a full novel, starting off with that great premise?
Well, I didn't start off writing a novel about a dead body and being in someone's garden. I actually wrote a novel about somebody killing someone, and then I ended up telling the story backwards, really, because I guess you come in at the end of the story, and as you'll know from reading the book, it's set in two time zones, the present and the past, and the past works backwards, so that the point that you end up much later in the book, about 3/4 of the way through the book, you read something that is where I started from. So that's the point I started from is buried much later on in the book.
Right. Okay. So your writing process, that was the first thing you wrote at that point. It wasn't at all written chronologically, was it? I mean,
No,
from page
no,
one. All right. Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
No. I wrote that book 4 times actually.
Wow. Okay.
In different ways, and it was always told from different points of view. One version had a diary in it. One version was a classic detective book all about Ronnie Twist, and that was really boring. It was a terrible version, and it ended up this way because I wanted to explain how it happened and why it happened, but I didn't want to explain that at the begging. I thought it was much more exciting to save it to the end. So the start point of the book is a lot later on within it. It just seemed like the right place to start in the end with somebody unearthing a body.
Well, no, I love the way it starts. I love the way that starts off with, well, you know who committed the murder, but you don't know why she did it, and you don't know what caused it. It's a bit different than your usual kind of who done it. So
it's a why done it, not a who done it.
Yes, a why done it. Well done, yeah. It's great, yeah. And I think it's great. And I really like your characters. I think it's really strong in just these characters. I mean, especially Lillian Templeton. But I also really have to say, I really enjoyed the Ronnie Twist. So the detective character. And I love the way she's described as a curious sheep.
Oh, yes.
And, as a curious sheep. And she has a distant kind of look, dreamy look, you describe it as. And then yet she focuses all of a sudden and catches Lillian Templeton off guard, and I think that's a great character, you know. And the sergeant Luke Carter, is kind of like, I feel like he's almost the kind of, you need a more relaxed character because they're quite intense, Templeton and Twist, and I think those are 3 great characters.
I think the sergeant picked up on the sort of sweet granny vibe. You know, he kind of felt sorry for her a little bit, getting interrogated and everything.
That was the plan. Yes.
But Ronnie Twist is not getting fooled. I love that. Yeah, I love that.
Oh, I'm glad. I wanted her to be a bit of a wolf in sheep's clothing.
That's the way you describe her in the book as well. It's great.
Good. Oh, I'm glad that's come across.
Yeah, it's great.
Is this going to be, because presumably you want to write more novels down the line. Do you think that Ronnie Twist is a character that you'll want to revisit?
Oh, definitely. I'm just finishing up the next book. It's with early readers at the moment, and it's also got Ronnie Twist in it. Like The Botanist, it's not all about Ronnie Twist, but it's told from somebody else's point of view. But she is in there solving a crime in Beverly, and I've got a third one in my head at the moment. So they're going to be called the Twist in the Tail novels.
Yes, that's what I read as
well.
Work
out why. Yes, that's why. Yes.
Very good.
I love that because that's what it says at the back of the book. It is set in the market town of Beverly, East Yorkshire. And this is the first in a series of Twist in the Tail mysteries. And I think it's great that you're already committed to, you've already said this is going to be a series of books, even though the second one is not out yet and the third one's ahead. So I'm really looking forward to this shared universe and Ronnie Twist.
Well, you'll certainly know Beverly very well by the time if you read, keep reading them, because there's more and more little bits of Beverly in each book. And people who live here have really enjoyed it. And I'm hoping it might inspire one or two to come and visit. It's a really nice place to be.
Nice. Okay, great. Well, yeah. And I love that when you have a shared universe, especially if it's you've got this with some authors that they always come back to the same universe. I'm thinking of Honoré de Balzac was this human comedy, writing 50 novels, and they're all kind of interlinked. People keep appearing. So please, I want to read more of these books.
Good.
Yeah, it's great.
Let me ask you something. When you decided that you wanted to write a book, did you always know that it was going to be a mystery novel? Is that the book you've always wanted to write?
I think so, yes. I mean, I do read. I read a lot of books myself, as you guys do. When I started off at 11 with Agatha Christie, I little knew that I'd still be reading books at the grand old age I've now reached, which I'm not going to share with you. And I still do love detective fiction, but I also read a lot of literary fiction as well now. I think it's inevitable it was going to end up being a mystery book. I feel I'm better at plotting than description. I think if you're going to write a more classic literary book, you've got to be a better writer than I am. Yeah, I'm thrilled that people like my books, but I'm not kidding myself. I'm not the next, I don't know, the next Anne Tyler or something like that. But I think I've read so many books that I understood the importance of keeping secrets back and twists and turns and red herrings and detectives generally. So I think it was always going to be inevitable. But it was thinking of a good story that was held me back for years and years and years, as well as a busy life. And it was when I got the idea, which is behind the story of The Botanist, Lillian's story, that I felt able to actually get a plot going and put something down. Not on paper these days, is it? It's on a screen.
Wow, well, yeah, great job. And I think Lillian, she's a character that I feel like you're not really supposed to support. I don't know, but I can't help, I can't help hoping that she'll be all right. And I feel for her. I really feel for her. And I feel like it's just, am I a psychopath? Perhaps, but maybe we're all a bit psychopath, psychopathic Lillian. Yeah, so
a lovable villain, eh?
She is a lovable villain because, to be fair, in the very beginning, I thought, okay, we found a body. And I liked the character. And I thought, she's a little old lady, can we somehow say that she didn't do it? But then no, it becomes sort of apparent early on that she did do it, and then I think, okay, let's hope there's good reasons why she did it. And I'm just constantly on her side, and I'm really hoping that. And again, we're not going to give away the ending, but you don't really know until the end whether she'll get away with it or not, to be honest. And the whole time I was just hoping she would. She is that. You kind of side with her. She is the lovable villain. She's the one that you hope that she gets away with it.
That's good, because that's what I wanted to achieve. And I did deliberately I wanted people to be kept guessing right to the end. I mean, if you find out what happens at the end, what's the point of turning the next page? So I feel you've got to keep the very last answer for the reader until right at the very end. So that is what I tried to do.
Cool. Keep the reader hooked, yeah.
It's interesting that you mentioned Agatha Christie, because that is where we first became aware of each other, was when we got speaking after I put an Instagram photo with plenty of Agatha Christie books on. I put out a little tea set and a little cake trays and everything with Agatha Christie books being served up to eat.
It was very pretty. It was very sweet.
It's great. And I got Dean into Agatha Christie because I started reading her when I was a teen. And Dean started reading her a bit later, but actually he's read almost every single Agatha Christie book.
Yeah, so I never thought I would like it.
Fans.
And PJ gave me And Then There Were None, and I said, well, this is pretty good. Let's get some more. And now on my shelf I have about 70. So there's literally a couple that I'm missing. I think she wrote 70 something. So there's a few that I'm missing.
That's impressive. That is impressive. No, she doesn't. It doesn't matter that it's set such a long time ago. The plots still work. It doesn't matter that it doesn't even feel dated, because so much of it is about character and about what people say rather than the times that they're living with. And you don't find yourself thinking, oh well, what about having a mobile phone, because it's just not relevant. She's such a good plotter.
Completely, yeah. Out of the top of your head, do you have a favorite Agatha Christie book?
You stole my question. You stole my question.
Sorry, I think it's everybody's favorite. Well, I think it's a lot of people's favorite, and that's The Murder of Roger Ackroyd.
All right, yeah, classic. That's a good one. I have to say, I think my favorite one is the first one I read, so The Murder in the Nile.
I just watched one of that on the telly the other day.
There's a new film of that coming out. I think this year or next. Yeah,
I can't wait to see that. I really want to see that. I think, and I did love all the David Suchets on the telly. I think he did a beautiful job. They were just so beautifully nuanced. Her character and the Miss Marples. She's just created such fabulous characters in Poirot and Miss Marple, that you can't fail to enjoy those. But they're all just so clever. They're just very clever. But my dad gave me a tip once. He said, if anybody's ever got grey eyes, they're usually the murderer.
Oh, that's great.
Well, let me ask you then, do you prefer Poirot over Miss Marple, or are you a Miss Marple fan?
Oh, that's much too hard. I don't think I can answer. I think I'd go for Poirot, and the reason is because he has other great characters with him. I love Captain Hastings, and I really, really love what's her name? The lady that
Mrs.
writes
Oliver.
Oh yeah, I love Ariadne Oliver and her apples and all those things. And I think because you get a little bit of a package with Poirot. So for that reason, he would probably just get the edge. But I do like Miss Marple. She's somebody said to me once that Lillian Templeton is like Miss Marple gone bad. And she is, because she looks like a sweet little old lady, but she really isn't. And so I've got a very soft spot for her.
Nice. Okay. Do you have any recommendation for writers or people who are trying to write, potential writers, people who are particularly struggling being creative during these odd times we're living in? I'm just wondering if you have any advice for
my
new writers.
Tip, actually, is get out and walk.
All right, get out and walk.
I go for a walk. Most days I go for 2 walks.
Mm-hmm.
We were lucky in Beverley. We have an area called the Westwood, which is a big pasture. There's cows on it at the moment. The farmers let their cows out, and you can just huge big green space. You can walk up to the top of the hill. The Black Mill on the cover of the book. I walk up to that Black Mill twice a day most days.
All right.
And it's always when I'm walking that I sort the ideas out. Whether it's planning, thinking about characters for a new book, or ironing out a little plot twist that I need to sort out, I always sort out my thinking when I'm walking. And I think just getting out of the house, not looking at the 4 walls, not having anything particular to do or think about, frees up your brain so that you can get those ideas.
Do you know which famous author had the same process?
Oh, no, I don't. Who?
EJ, do you know?
Not right now, no. Who?
Mr. Charles Dickens.
Oh, does he?
He would walk the streets of London every single night, and that was where he got all his ideas for his characters and his books. Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, well, I'm a good company then.
Well, okay. Well, look, it's good, nice to be compared to Dickens.
This is very
that's great. So it's great. And actually, Dickens came to mind as well, was the whole shared universe thing. So you're doing a good job.
Dickens is my personal favorite. And I actually had a similar journey to yourself. I started out once PJ lent me some, the original Agatha Christie. I started out reading a lot of crime books, and then I progressed through to more literary fiction, and I'm reading a lot of Victorian stuff at the moment.
Obsessed with Victorian stuff.
Obsessed with it at the moment.
I mean, I'm thinking of just changing the name to just the Victorian Literature Podcast, because it's just basically Dean reading Victorian literature, and I might read something else as a kind of a comic relief part.
Wow. Yes, you need a bit of comic relief.
Well, and why don't you tell us what you've been reading yourself lately, particularly during the lockdown and things?
Sure. Yeah, well, at the beginning of lockdown, I wanted to read the new Hilary Mantel, the Mirror and the Light. But I decided in order to get into her world again, I needed to go back to the beginning of Wolf Hall. So I read the entire Hilary Mantel trilogy.
Oh, right, okay.
All, which took about 3 or 4 months. That was wonderful. That was very immersive. And then more recently, I've read some Ishiguro.
I love Ishiguro. Yeah.
I just read When We Were Orphans.
Oh, such a good one.
But regularly, I try to read the sort of books that I'm trying to write as well. So I've recently read some Colin Dexter, some Morse. And I regularly read Barbara Vine or Ruth Rendell, either of her writings, because she writes from the point of view of individuals who are a bit off kilter, like Lillian.
Right, okay.
If I try to write from the point of view of a normal person, it turns out very boring. So I have to write from the point of view of people who are definitely not normal, hence Lillian. And the Soloist is my second book, is also written from the point of view of somebody who's not quite like Lillian, but nonetheless is a bit quirky. So, and that's what Barbara Vine does. So I'm reading one of her books at the moment, The House of Stairs, for inspiration as to how to get inside the mind of somebody like that.
Awesome, yeah. I love to read some of those books. I am a big fan of Ishiguro, but I actually haven't read the others, so I love to read them. Great, but When We Were Orphans is a good one, because that's his only detective novel, right? So
yes, it is. Yes,
and it's a kind of an unusual detective, isn't he? He's kind of I forgot his name now, but it's a great setting as well. I find that whole Shanghai segment at the end is very dramatic and
it's fascinating, and I particularly enjoyed the beginning when he's a little boy and
as well. Yeah.
Things. Totally, that was great. Oh, and Where the Crawdads Sing, which is a much more recently written book, but I love that book. That was beautiful book. So yeah, that's a good one.
Okay. Wow.
Well, Anne, thank you very much for calling in. I'm going to finish with the same question that we always ask every author that calls into the show. We ask them if there's one book. Maybe I should have told you this in advance so you could prepare. But I want,
Thanks for that.
if there's one book that you wish you had written, what would it have been?
Of Mice and Men. It's my favourite book.
All right. Okay. Cool.
That wasn't too hard, actually. Yeah.
That's the one that popped up. Okay.
Prep. You came straight there. You knew it straight away. Very good.
Yeah, and because that is so character driven. It's you know those people. You can say Lenny would do that, George would do that. He wouldn't do the other. Curly wouldn't do that. It's so beautifully written. It's a great plot and it's great characters.
Wow. Awesome.
I do particularly love characters. I think that's what draws me to Agatha Christie. That's what draws me to Dickens, and that's why I really liked Lillian. In your book, in The Botanist, because she's an intriguing character. At the end of the day, as we said earlier, you want to support her, but at the same time, she did some bad things, and you get into her head a little bit, and you sort of understand why. And characters are so important. I really do love good character work.
And life's not simple, is it?
No.
Wow.
It's
not. Yeah, I think the characters, it's a character-driven plot, guys. So if you're into that, go ahead and you can get her book, The Botanist, in Amazon, right? But also, can you also get them directly from Blossom Springs Publishing? Your publishing
That's
house?
right. There's a link on their website. There's a link on my website as well.
Yeah, Wedgwood.com. Yeah, you can get the link there.
Yeah.
We'll also leave a link then. And yes, please, guys, read this great book. And I'm really looking forward to the next twist in the tale book. Definitely going to read it.
Very much. I'll keep you posted.
Thanks, Anne.
Thanks. Have a great evening.
That's nice. And you. Bye.
See you. Bye. Thanks for calling.
Wow. Well, PJ, how unexpected was that Anne would call in
really
right as we were mentioning that? Wow.
Yeah, that's bad, but that's karma, guys. Sometimes you meet the people you admire, and they call up with the show. So there you go.
So everyone check out The Botanist. We do recommend that. But PJ, I think we have other recommendations, right?
We do indeed, guys. We have some recommendations. Talking about crime authors, talking about comic authors, I've got two. First of all, one of my favorite crime authors is Seicho Matsumoto. He is Japan's most famous crime author. He made it popular in the 60s. And he kind of added a lot of kind of like post-Second World War nihilism and very dark and about police corruption, and he kind of made it quite philosophical, the crime fiction. So check up Seicho Matsumoto and check up his book Points and Lines. It's a great mystery novel about trains and train stations. It's a great sort of plot twist at the end. I love it. Easy to read as well. He's basically He's basically the Agatha Christie of Japan. So he's very well renowned there, but not that famous here. So check him out. And for the not comic book lovers, but I mean comical novel lovers.
Okay.
Here
we go. Spider-Man Part 3000.
Spider-Man the vegan story line. Yeah. Lucky Jim by Kingsley Amis, a classic by 1954. Highly recommend it, guys. Really funny. I actually rarely have laughed out so much. Again, the descriptions are ridiculous. The profession of the guy, he's a medieval history lecturer. Jim Dixon is his name. So he has this kind of, I suppose Kingsley Amis took the driest subject he could think of and made this guy a lecturer. And he's not, I don't know, he's kind of like he lacks confidence. He has a kind of a girlfriend called Margaret who tried to commit suicide. I mean, it's got a lot of dark themes, but it's very ridiculous as well. And it's just, it's great. It's just really funny. And I was quite emotional at the end, though. So I liked it as well. It's really nice. Lucky Jim by Kingsley Amis, the book that made him famous. Not a British novel. What about you, Dean?
So I thought, what we really need is, because I've been reading all this Victorian stuff, and I just thought, for my recommendation, why don't I just pick a book that's easy, it's accessible, anyone can read it, anyone will be interested in it. So, of course, I've gone for transcripts of ancient Greek trials from classical Athens.
That is a very easy read, indeed. Yeah.
So just something for the kids,
Something for the kids. Just read it, before going to bed at the train station, waiting for your loved one. There you go. Easy reading.
Christopher Carey was the editor on this one, on the Routledge series, Trials from Classical Athens. Now,
that's very impressive.
I'm going to say, to be honest, this is only like 250 pages, so it is short to read. It's a really fun book. I know that you're going to say, how can it be? These are transcripts of court cases, of actual court cases in classical sort of 5th to 4th century BC Athens. But they're hilarious. So first of all, it's interesting to see that they're arguing about the same things we are. There's homicide cases, there's assault and wounding cases, suits concerning property, commercial, disputes about inheritance, that kind of thing, citizenship. Sacred olives, that's not so modern, but all the others,
Oh, right, okay.
So and it's the same kind of ideas. And the way they did court speeches in Athens was basically, you wouldn't go in and be questioned. You would just write a set speech, and you would deliver your speech. The opposition would deliver theirs, and the best speech wins. It was a kind of theater.
It's a debate class. So the basis of this was all these debate classes.
So you would pay people to write a good speech for you.
And now, guys, if you're wondering, Dean actually does read this stuff with great pleasure, and
these are amazing. Yeah, there's so much fun.
You have a high tolerance. You have a high tolerance for all kinds of stuff, Dean.
I suppose I do. Yeah, I love these. We've got all the greats: Antiphon with his homicide cases, Lysias, Isaias. Hyperides is in here, and the big one, Demosthenes, the famous politician. So a lot of good stuff in here.
He's kind of like, he's the equivalent of Jim Carrey, isn't he? Of those times. He's quite the chap.
But some of this stuff, it's just fun to read. The speeches are they're witty at times because they're a kind of theater, and they're just good reads. I really like them, and I think that anyone could sit down and read one of these cases. And of course, you would pay a good speechwriter to write your speech for you so that you could win in the case. It's brilliant. I really recommend, if anyone has any interest in classical Greece and you're just reading the Odyssey or Plutarch or Strabo's geography or some garbage, just read some trials, just read some trials.
All right, read some trials. Easy reading, guys.
That's my recommendation. I think we're going to take a quick ad break. We're going to hear a quick ad for one or two other great podcasts, and we'll be back in about 2 minutes.
Oh.
Hello! My name is Tasman Cooey, and I'm the Game Master for Tangent Tabletop, an actual play D&D podcast. In this show, we're telling a story that puts our characters in a constant moral dilemma where they have to ask themselves the question, am I doing what's right? The world of Iglos is very divided, with many sides to a seemingly impending war where the fate of the world is at risk. We tell this story through roleplay, music, and sound effects that will drag you into the world and make you ask yourselves the same question every step of the way. Please join me in the world of Iglos by listening to Tangent Tabletop on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts.
Hi, I'm Fearful Jesuit, host of The Paranoid Strain, a show that explains conspiracy theories to normal people. Every episode is carefully researched, fully scripted, and incorporates interviews, audio clips, original music, and a bunch of nonsense to explain the history, impact, and bizarre beliefs related to one conspiracy topic at a time. We're doing an extensive series on secret societies, the Knights Templar, the Freemasons, the Illuminati, and we'd love to have you along for the ride. New episodes drop every 2 weeks, wherever you get your podcasts.
Okay, guys, there were some ads. So I think, PJ, that we're almost done. We've covered the Botanist, we've had our sponsor, we've told everyone to go to booksboys.com and especially to click that Patreon link and get all our juicy bonus content.
Oh yeah, guys, and there's more stuff appearing next month. Mm-hmm. So have a look out. Particularly, I'm feeling some Shakespeare. I'm still feeling the Shakespeare vibes.
I can't wait to get through Hamlet.
Well, yeah, so there've been plenty of stuff happening, and we've got a few more stuff happening, but we're not going to mention it quite yet. But we got some cool ideas.
Some stuff in the works. It's going to be really good, and of course, we hope that everyone likes that. By the way, there's links on the website to our social medias where I post daily, so there's a lot of stuff on there for people who want to see things as well.
There you go, guys. And don't forget, we mentioned Lev Tolstoy. He said the first crime of mankind ever committed is when man started eating and killing animals. Of course, I'm mentioning, follow us up also in The Holy Wholesome Life. Why don't you read a book and have a nice vegan soup beside it?
There we go. PJ, I did a video on Instagram of me reading Dickens, well, pretending to read Dickens, whilst listening to, of course, Django Reinhardt on the vinyl, on the record player, Gypsy Jazz.
Of course it did.
Got over 1,000 views, and I felt like such a happy little millennial, such a happy little millennial.
That sounds exactly like the thing like you would do anyway, so there you go.
Yeah, but now I get to do it and be cool with the kids. Guys, it's time for us to take you out with a song, and we have a special treat, PJ.
Oh, yeah. Well, having read all this Shakespeare, we, of course, had to take one of the songs from his plays, particularly The Tempest, was one of my favorite characters of all Shakespeare plays, Ariel, the spirit of the island. So this is Ariel's song, performed by both of us and my partner in The Holy Wholesome Life, and my partner in life, Elisa. So the three of us are actually singing the song. So here's a Shakespearean treat for thee.
We have PJ on the lead, really, on lead vocals and guitar, with Alicia on harmonies, and I did a little bit of percussion, and then I do some backing vocals and some background effects and things and keyboard in the second half. I love this one. I think we did a really, really bang up job on this one. So,
well, I think Shakespeare would be proud of us. Can we say that? Is that a big headed? I mean, he'd be proud of us, reviving his song anyway in the year 2021. So, and I'm happy with it. So here it is, guys. Enjoy it. Maybe dance along. I tried to make it sound very Bard-esque, kind of very sort of being in a bit of a tavern bar in kind of 1660.
I might have brought it too much to the 80s in the final the final sort of verse, but
we have a tendency to do that, Dean.
I have a tendency to do that with everything. Yeah, yes. Everything becomes 80s. Well, look, guys, we're going to take you out with that song, and then, of course, our usual credit outro sequence, and we'll be back in about a month.
All right, guys. See ya. Take it easy. Come on to these yellow sands, then take hands. Curtsy when you haven't kissed, the wide waves twist. Footed feet here and there, sweet spice, good and bad. Hark, hark, bow wow, the watchdogs bark, bow wow. Hark, hark, I hear strains of strutting, chanting clear. Crack, carpet, the flutter lies of his bones are coral made. Those are pearls that were his eyes. Nothing of him that doth fade, but does suffer, see it change into something rich and strange. Of his bones are coral made. steps back my way.
Books Boys was presented by The Dean and P.J. Burke in association with Thaddeus Penguin Productions. This episode was brought to you by our sponsor, Mrs. Harris's Possibly Existent Products. If you would like to get in touch, you can email us at booksboys@hotmail.com or visit us at booksboys.com. The intro uses Driving in the 70s from the Of Soundtracks and Garage Bands EP by Trapdoor. And the outro uses Dog's Light by Bravo Max from the album of the same name. All music used is either pod-safe or used with permission. If you'd like to support the show, click on the Amazon or Audible referral links on booksboys.com or go to patreon.com/booksboys and get all of the Bufanda Boys bonus shows. Thank you kindly for listening to us. Please tell your friends and come back next time for another episode of Books Boys. Read some books!
Hold on a second, you can record me putting on a funny voice like that if you'd like to. Hold on a second, and put it straight at the blooper, Jesus.